When are you going to retire?
When am I going to retire? Well, not anytime soon.
What are your hopes for the future?
In on a personal, professional?
Both.
Mostly mere survival.
Yeah. Is that where you're at?
That's mostly where I'm at.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Don't know. I mean, retirement is a scary word, isn't it, in many ways? But
I think I don't like.
I still will. If you took, I suppose, you juggled everything I have going, and you probably looked at my mortgage.
Yeah,
you might say she won't be retiring for a hell of a long time.
Well, I mean, I definitely won't be.
No.
Like, I mean, as you well know, I mean, I am not. But I mean, would you
making an honest living just was a bad idea?
Possibly, but
bad idea.
Yeah, but I mean, if
seems honourable, but really,
I would feel sorry for your family and friends if you ever did retire.
Would you?
Yeah, I would.
Why?
Because then, if you didn't have the focus of your job, your focus would become on them.
Yeah,
would it not?
And would it be just relentless?
But I just think you need stimulation.
Yeah. I got really bored. Remember last couple of weeks?
I do.
Like, absolutely.
I do. Because you were in. There was no massive project hanging over your head or trouble. So you were.
I wasn't in trouble. Isn't that bad?
You weren't in trouble or having some almost unachievable project hanging over your head.
Yeah.
So instead, then you were just giving out about the dogs.
We didn't start this to talk about me, by the way.
No.
This was I was
this was trying to embarrass me.
I was just trying to sort of, everybody seems to be going on holidays, and we're going ourselves shortly soon.
Yeah.
Even though we'll just keep in touch just in case.
Yeah.
We always have that. Hope that maybe something big enough will happen.
And which it has traditionally when you've gone on holidays.
It has. No, it won't now. It won't. No, I think I'm over that hex.
Yeah.
I think somebody put a little curse on me there for a while, and I think I've kind of. It's like my penalty points. I think I've kind of worked my way out of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of that is irrelevant to what's happened to poor David and Christopher.
Well, exactly. A segue into that would be they won't be retiring anytime soon.
No, they're going to have to get back hard to work. You see, this is what happens. People have plans and they think they're home and dry.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden something can happen in the blink of an eye. And of course, this was quite a biggie because the drug dealing brothers, the Waldrons, were hit with big losses in some Garda raids last week. 9.6 million drug seizure has to be one of the biggest. I mean, outside those, container ship type stuff, and perhaps the methamphetamine in Cork and those kind of very big operations. That's a lot for an organised crime group operating in the Dublin area, along with a stash of €1.1 million in cash.
Exactly. I mean, it's absolutely huge. I mean, we've obviously spoken about things like the MV Matthew. These are international drug plots, I suppose, but in terms of
they're the mother loads.
They're the mother loads, and they're to be shared around a number of countries. But I think this will be certainly the biggest of sort of domestic seizure this year. I think the one we spoke about recently, the £8.5 million found on a plane, that I think that was the biggest seizure within that context as well the year before. So these are the very biggest ones. And also 1.1 million in cash is a huge amount of money. If you look at the street value of those drugs, the actual purchase value is going to be significantly lower. So 1.1 million in cash would buy you a lot of drugs and would pay a lot of debts. And
you'd wonder, is that the bigger hit to the crime group than the 9.6 million street value, as you say? There's sums for this, which I obviously can't do.
Yeah.
But let's say they paid a tenth of it.
Yeah, a tenth or something. Yeah, some percent. 20, well, a fifth maybe, which would be 20% of the overall value. Or look,
I'd say a 20th, which would be 500,000. Am I correct? In around?
In around
say
that.
Say they spent about 500,000 on that, okay? Yeah. I mean, that is a loss, but it's the 9.6 million is a very big figure, and it's just the way law enforcement operates.
Yeah,
they use the street value. They wanted to, to make a bigger splash. Really, the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's people slag the guards off for it, but it's used by law enforcement across the world. They take the value. I think a kilo of cocaine, they estimate a gram is sold for €60 a gram on the street, so they work it out from there. Now, obviously, the two Waldron brothers, Christopher and David, were not arrested, but it is their organised crime group that they're suspected of leading are believed to be behind this
And
operation.
at a loss of this. Now, the drugs were discovered after the initial search was on a house in the Ward area of North County Dublin, and there was follow-up searches. And the Gardaí have said themselves it was an intelligence-led operation. Of course, it would be. To know when to move on a group, on an operation, on a stash house, and clearly all of this product and money wasn't found in the one place. But it's a lot to get from one series of raids.
Yeah.
So they know when to move. And that's always been the key to good policing and good intelligence, that, you know, this grouping isn't going to have that level of money and amount of drugs sitting for very long.
No, I mean...
It'll be moved very quickly, moved onwards, broken up, you know, sent on out to their network of dealers and all the rest of it. So this is ideal timing for the Gardaí to move in on these stash houses, and really bad for the Waldrons.
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably must have got it almost at its very peak. I mean, we saw with guys like Thomas Marr, the haulier, we saw how the cash gets moved, that it will get picked up at some point and moved probably by truck. So exactly, it'd be held there for a very short period of time before being moved on, probably by some professional cash couriers. We have had other stories about people that specialise in that solely, in particular an Eastern European gang. But we have seen, I think really since the beginning of the policing of the feud, so in 2016 when the police really moved in on the Kinahan cartel, the level of seizures of cash has been quite phenomenal. And it wasn't always that high, I don't think. I think the guards have certainly made great inroads into that, and understanding, I think, as well, how disrupting that is for a crime gang. 1.1 million in cash, even just the physical collection of all of that money. It's very, very hard to replace. Obviously it's still a cash business for the most part, drug dealing, it's going to be a huge blow. And then the question comes, who pays for this? I suppose. If you purchase that amount of drugs, is it bought on credit? Is it paid for on delivery? There's many different ways these things seem to be worked out. A lot of the drugs business in Ireland is done on credit. People are given the drugs and then they have to pay in the aftermath. Of course, the great problem with that, and we see that's just replicated throughout the country, is that people, once those drugs are seized, you still owe the money. And that money then is really, really hard to generate if you have convictions, or, you know,
you certainly can't say whoops.
Yeah, you can't say whoops.
Cops now took it from me. Interesting, the mixture of drugs that was part and parcel of this raid. So, like the Waldron organised crime group are clearly dealing in those sort of popular recreational drugs. There's no mention of heroin here. It's cocaine, cannabis, ketamine, LSD. Who's taking LSD?
Yeah.
And MDMA. Who is taking LSD?
Well, I don't know. Like obviously,
students still. Ketamine is really popular amongst sort of young 20-year-olds out. It's obviously proper use. Is it a horse tranquilizer?
It's a horse tranquilizer. Yeah, it's ketamine is
ket. It's called. They all call it ket.
Do they? Well, you know the street lingo.
I'm down with it.
I mean, ketamine has been sold in Ireland for a couple of decades, but the levels of there's been increased seizures of it massively. So in recent years, people use it, I suppose, as a kind of ecstasy substitute to an extent.
Well, MDMA is there as well. So they are, I mean, those certainly ketamine, LSD, MDMA, and I suppose cocaine and cannabis. They're all actually the drugs used by the young people that are out and about. I know cocaine, there is evidence that it's, crossing all age barriers, all social barriers and all the rest of it. And the addiction services would tell us that a lot of people coming for treatment with first-time drug use addiction are in their 60s and 70s, and a lot of people from rural Ireland. But I do think those other drugs, you think ketamine, LSD and MDMA are available everywhere? Are they more sort of city centre, populous, urban drugs?
No, I think they're probably available everywhere. Obviously, LSD, has been sold since the 1960s. But
I can't believe people are still taking LSD in a non...
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they're
scientific way.
I mean, yeah, I mean, people are
taking that.
Well, people are. I mean, the fact is, ironically,
who wants sort of hallucinations and bad trips?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, interestingly, both ketamine and LSD are being prescribed to people across the US in particular. What's called microdoses of LSD and ketamine.
Is this for post-traumatic stress disorder?
For post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic depression, various other conditions like that. Quite a lot of people in the US, they go into a clinic like people going in maybe to get methadone, and they get a microdose of ketamine or LSD every day. And as far as I know, a project is also being done in Trinity College at the moment where people are being given very small amounts of this in a therapeutic way. So that's the other irony of the drugs business. It's being used and trialled by a project in Trinity to see if it can help people with really chronic depression. Meanwhile, people are...
I always thought it was ecstasy that was used for the post-traumatic stress disorder. There were studies done in the past that they believed it was an actual cure, but maybe that was LSD.
Well, no. Well, I mean, it's what's called, I suppose, really microdosing of LSD is also being used to treat depression. I mean, obviously, initially ecstasy or MDMA was also a psychiatric drug and was given to people in marriage counselling, I think, at some point in the 1970s to sort of connect with your partner.
In marriage counselling, the whole country be going along to marriage counselling.
And I mean, look, cocaine is obviously available in pharmacies at some point as well in the past.
But everything had a use, I suppose, and everything does have a medicinal use in certain doses and all the rest of it. But yeah, you can just see the sort of target market now that they have there with that, what's been swept up there.
If you look at that organisation, the Waldron organisation, I mean, they really became obviously there's an international aspect in that they're getting these drugs from people outside of the country, but they became, I think, probably one of the major drug dealing organizations in this country, and they were making their money not as other gangs in the past had done, maybe the family and that who had sort of cornered that sort of heroin market and were dealing with a certain type of addict. The Waldron organisation, as well as becoming a force in North Dublin, were really dealing cocaine to the middle classes ultimately, and some of their associates were very much involved in that. So you can see those drugs. Obviously, they'll work across all classes, but there is that is, I suppose, where the money is to be made in Ireland.
The Waldrons haven't had a good run of things, really. Of course, we were talking about them a number of times recently. Eamon Dillon in particular was in talking about them because they were both before the courts on proceeds of crime cases with the Criminal Assets Bureau, where there was houses targeted. There was quite an amount of assets which have been handed over or taken by the state, and they've gone into the state exchequer now belonging to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the David Waldron's cases amounted to 3.3 million in total. That was what the CAB had seized off him. Probably most well known, including a beautiful sort of house in County Wexford. That was kind of a split level home. I think it was 4 double bedrooms, a sort of view of the mountainside, a man cave, as we've spoken about before, with pool tables, and I think it was a picture of Don Corleone on the wall.
That's right.
So, I mean, this...
And a little, horse riding ring. That's not what they're called, is it? What are they called?
I don't know.
Little equestrian area outside.
And a
show jumping arena.
Show jumping arena and a pool table. And then he also had homes in Dublin. And again, his brother as well, Christopher Waldron, also ultimately had a house seized in Cabra. There was other homes targeted as well. And alongside all of this was the usual collection of watches and cars, and all of this was seized over both brothers over kind of a really lengthy...
And funny, in the raids the other day, there's more vehicles and more designer goods taken. You know what I mean? They've only just finished these cases with the Criminal Assets Bureau, and they're back for them for more.
So, I mean, in the David Waldron case, David Waldron would have sort of come to the attention of the papers at the time of the height of the Eamon Dunn's the Don's gang. He was one of those guys associating with him kind of visibly. But his drug dealing career went even further back, back really to the turn of the century. He was a very close associate of a guy called Richard Keogh. He also was a close pal of people like Mick Kelly, Darren Kearns. I'm just naming some of the people who were killed.
Daithí Douglas, all dead, yeah.
All dead.
Yeah.
He's from Cabra originally, and he, Richard Keogh would have been a very major player in the drugs business at around the turn of the century, and he was ultimately, I believe he was killed in Spain.
He was shot dead outside a bar, I think, in Malaga.
And they had a registered business together, him and David Waldron. Richard Keogh was one of the first guys to sort of step into the breach when the Gilligan gang kind of got toppled, I suppose. And he was a young guy also from Cabra who seemed to make his way into the international market straight off. Again, he had amassed certain homes and visible assets. So David Waldron, even back at that stage, was kind of right up the top of that ladder. He also mixed with, as we said, Daithí Douglas. I think one of the seizures that Daithí Douglas obviously was killed as part of the Hutch-Kinahan feud, but he'd also served time in prison, including being caught with a major quantity of cocaine, and that was linked also to Waldron's associates. So he's mixed around with all of these guys from all for
they've
2 decades.
They've lost a lot of friends, and they've lost a lot of assets, and they've lost a lot of now, stash.
They have, and it's again,
it's a constant battle, isn't it? I mean,
it is a constant battle. I mean, I was actually watching.
They always say about criminals they have to be lucky all the time, and I suppose the Gardaí would say they have to be lucky just once.
They do, and that's definitely true. And then I think these kind of seizures, while that the financial problems that can arise out of these can be really almost, they cause most of these fallouts in gangland. Most of the troubles are caused by these seizures, because I think I was watching that program, Ibiza Narcos, on Sky, and they were saying, I think it was there was a Spanish drug dealer, wasn't it? I think he was saying, we expect 30% of our stuff to be seized, of the drugs coming into the island, and 70% to get through. So if you're really to be a good drug dealer, and I did hear this about Christy Kinahan Sr., that he did do this, that he expected a certain amount to be seized. So he put away the money. Like, he paid his insurance effectively.
Okay.
So I'm going to put away 30% of all my profits, because
it might not happen. My losses.
Yeah, because it might not happen this time, but eventually that some of that's going to be seized. And if I don't have the money to pay for that, I'm in trouble. So it takes a kind of a discipline, a bit of long-term thinking, a bit of, I'm not going to screw my supplier no matter what. I'm going to make sure I have the money for him, because if things do get seized, then you have to sell more furiously to pay off your debts. So whether all of these guys do that or not, like, we just know for a fact.
But you can see the squeeze on, I mean, you can actually stand back at the moment and see where the resourcing is going into. It's the young organisation in Sligo. Yeah. It's the big organisation in Dublin. It's the Waldrons. Yeah. And it's the family. Yeah. And that is where the focus of the policing is going, the intelligence gathering, the operations against the groupings. Undoubtedly, there's other groups out there who are slowly and secretly making their fortunes and making their way up without the kind of attention that these 4 groupings are having. But can you think of another one? Is that's really, it's those, they're the top 4 that are being dismantled at the moment.
Yeah, there are other organisations, and of course then there's the interplay between.
But I mean, as in, are the focus of this relentless Garda operations.
Yeah, and then there's the other more mysterious. But there's a couple of gangs in Limerick as well that are associated with those feuding gangs. But absolutely, if you see, they're the major players, I think, and certainly the Mr. Big organisation again has come under pressure this week. The family have had numerous seizures linked to them, so they have taken over that drugs business. And while the Kinahans, certainly they were key suppliers of the Waldrons, but the Kinahans may have whatever
the Kinnans have been tackled on an international
They
level.
are.
And I mean, so certainly a lot of their associates here are still under, constant investigation and surveillance. But these are the groupings who are going to be beginning to implode.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. And they always, the guards would always tell you, I suppose, everybody has a plan, don't they? And the police have a plan as well. And they look at these giant organizations and they have to work out how to tackle them, how to dismantle them. And it is one word that comes through again and again and again is this relentlessness.
Yeah.
The relentless pursuits. There's no point in a one-off, going in, getting a big seizure and walking away from them and not having a look at them again for 6 months. They are looking to hit them again and again and again and again. Yeah. And it's like almost a boxer in a ring. Yeah. And you just keep the punches coming until eventually the opponent collapses.
And of course, in the Kinahan case, picking off the bottom rungs then led to picking off some of the middle rungs, and then that has got them further and further up the food chain, because I think these organizations, they can only rely, if you're at the head of a drugs gang, you can really only rely on a handful of people. And if those handfuls start getting picked off or getting caught with stuff, they tend, and as we saw this with the Kinahan organization, when their key guys started either have to flee the country or ended up in prison, they started having to hire these people, Imre Arakas and various other types that they couldn't fully trust, or they weren't fully willing to trust. So yeah, taking a few people off the thing really puts pressure on the system.
And creates a paranoia within the grouping as well, that, you know what I mean? Somebody, obviously there is either, technological intelligence gathering there, or there's as we said, there's a rat in the camp. And I mean, that does create, whether there is or there isn't, that creates this huge big sense of paranoia. And you often will see groupings implode before the Gardaí actually get to that final level of bringing many of them before the courts, because they'll implode themselves. Yeah. Very stressful being a drug dealer.
It is. It is.
Don't think
well, if you look at all of the,
to cope with that now at all.
I mean,
it's all about the lifestyle. It's all focused on the lifestyle. You were talking there about David Waldron's country pile, which was all that. It was his room, his man cave to relax in. It was the beautiful bedroom to wake up in the morning and open your doors and look out over the countryside. It was the show jumping arena for whatever the kids or whatever to do their show jumping in. But do you ever actually get there and relax? Or are you there constantly stressed out by the next time your door's going to be beaten down?
Well, I suppose the other thing that we don't know would be, is there some people out there who've been heavily involved in the drugs business and have profited and have never appeared on the Garda radar or the Sunday World radar?
Course.
And there must be.
Of course.
There's anonymous people that nobody knows.
Loads and loads of them,
Yeah, and so there are some people out there, but they're not the guys going around with the Rolexes and beating up guys outside pubs.
I mean, just the level of, you're aspiring to this lifestyle, which is all around, being wealthy.
Yeah.
Being comfortably rich enough to be able to afford yourself this sort of fabulous villas, in the sun, spend time with your family and all the rest of it. But do you ever actually, I wonder, in your head get there into that relaxation zone?
Well, do you know what I always think? Like, why not? Like, why don't they just retire at some point?
Yeah.
And go and like maybe if they've got 5 million in the bank, 5 million in the bank, do they not then at some point say, that's it
I've
now?
enough.
I'm just definitely not going to.
Well, maybe
stay
the ones
involved.
we don't know about.
Maybe so.
And then the others are maybe addicted to.
I think that is it. I think that is, but that shows you the motivation is not really money and lifestyle. I think the motivation really is to be a big shot.
And
I think
the thrill of getting one over. I mean, I do recall having conversations with a kind of a senior figure in organised crime who used to describe that thrill to the extent that I believed he was addicted to crime as opposed to the money or any of the other sort of aspects around it. It was just the getting the gear through or getting one over on the cops.
And I think those motivations are far more the motivations for criminals than the actual money. I think the money is really secondary for a lot of them. I think, funny you mentioned that, because we've spoken about Eamon the Don Dunn. And I remember the star, Keith Faulkner, did an interview with his dad afterwards, and his dad was saying
After the murder.
after he was murdered, and his dad, it was kind of a doorstep interview, and his dad said he was addicted to crime, and he was just addicted to crime. It wasn't. It was just the thrill of it all, and that he'd asked him, "Would you not just give it up?"
No.
And he couldn't. And I think
because it is it has to be a thrilling world if you're somebody who's a risk taker, who's impulsive, who constantly needs to be, riveted by, and probably the last thing you do is sit back and relax with the family.
and
do you know
also
what I mean?
then I think
But it must be quite a thrilling existence in a world to be constantly on the edge of.
Yes, and I think the other bit of it is, like, we spoke about anonymous guys with maybe making loads of money, but most of them probably could be far more anonymous than they are. But I think part of why they're doing it is to be not anonymous. Now, maybe they don't want to be in the Sunday world, but they don't want to be anonymous in the community that they live in. They want people to know they're a big shot, to treat them with respect, to know that these aren't people to be messed with, rather than just an unknown living in a nice house. So I think there's all these complicated motivations. And money is just one of them, I think.
You know what? Like, there's an opening and an opportunity for a couple of criminals to have their own podcast.
Well, do they not? There's not many of them.
The overworld, and they could discuss our motivations
Well,
for how ridiculous we are to be out earning an honest living and handing half of it to the taxpayer, to the tax man every month. You know,
it's an interesting,
It
journal
would work.
world. It would work. It would work. Would it be interesting to listen to? Probably for us, but I don't know if the members of the public are as engaged with our inner psychology.
Yeah, but you see, they could turn the tables on us, and they could do a kind of a David Attenborough style look into our own existences.
It would be a murky podcast, wouldn't it?
Right. Let's leave it at that before we say any more.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.